Hey, today I'm talking about the 1990s trilogy of kaiju films, Rebirth of Mothra. Next up is Rebirth of Mothra. This is a 1996 film, and the basic premise is this really feels like a direct sequel to Mothra's other films. Decades later, Mothra's now old, but she has an egg, so there's hope for the future. But wouldn't you know it, a greedy construction company does some bad environmental stuff, which leads to the release of a trapped kaiju who then messes up the place. And I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It was really solid. Premise is great, the environmental message is great. It's definitely heavy-handed, but like, I don't mind. It's Mothra. They're usually heavy-handed messages, so it's on brand. This one is definitely more kid-focused than the other ones, but it doesn't feel as like goofy as some kaiju films do. I appreciated the balance there. But I also really like that like once the main action started, it felt way more adult. It felt very intense. The effects looked really good, like the earth was splitting up at one point. That looked so awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed that. The end was really satisfying. I also really liked, I'm just gonna call them the fairies because that's just what I'm used to, but like instead of being twins this time, there's actually 3 fairies. 2 are good and 1 is evil. I think that's a really brilliant, really interesting idea. They're like the through line of this whole thing, which again was a really great choice. And I like their personalities a lot too. They're sort of like Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, which that was fun. I like that. Not exactly, but close. I also loved the mini Mothra. They refer to it as fairy, but it's just like a little miniaturized Mothra that the ladies ride around. And I'm like, that's great. That's such an interesting idea. It's a great way to like get Mothra in more scenes. Plus, like, I feel like it kind of helps better serve the metaphor of like Mothra is this trilogy of God the Mother, the Son, which is the egg, and then this little mini-me one is the Holy Spirit, which is kind of what the fairies were anyway. So this just sort of like reinforces that more so, which is really neat. Yeah, no, it was just a really solid, really interesting film. So like, I thoroughly enjoyed it, would totally recommend it. It definitely doesn't reach the heights of the first 2, which I crazy loved, but if you've seen those, definitely give this one a watch. If you've never seen any of them, it's definitely still worth a watch. I mean, I would totally for sure recommend the first Mothra movie the most, without a doubt. But if you want something with more modern special effects, this is probably gonna be a little bit more up your alley. So yeah, no, thoroughly enjoyed, totally recommend. Next up is Rebirth of Mathra II. The biggest issue with this movie is its convoluted plot stuff. Basically, humans have polluted the ocean, and now there's a kaiju that's eating up all of the pollution, which you'd think would be a good thing, but it's then like spitting out these starfish that are polluting even more. So yeah, I did like it, but I had to pause it and go back and be like, wait, what are they saying? What is the plot? What is happening? And so that made it a bit difficult to watch. It's so messy. I liked the villain because it starts off as a sea creature. I'm cool with it being able to like be in the sea and on land, but it's like it's really slow on land, kind of like a turtle or something. But then it also has the ability to fly, which I'm like, that's way too much. It really should just be like an air versus sea thing, because then it's like, how is Mothra gonna deal with this sea creature when they're a flying creature? I think that makes for an interesting challenge. But yeah, no, they're also just a flying creature, so like they can just do anything. If anything, I think they should have gone like a dolphin route of like, they can jump out of the water, but then they have to fall back in. Like maybe glide a little bit at most, but like it's too much. Also just like this whole thing about like having to look into this old kingdom, they're the solution to everything, but turns out they had the solution with them the entire time. It's Gogru, who, oh my god, I hate the pee joke so much. Also, I just find it ugly. I hate the little antenna on top. But I dislike that they had the solution the entire time. They technically didn't need to do anything in this movie. They could have just been like, hey, Grogu, save the day, and the day would have been saved. This Mothra is referred to as Leo Mothra, and his underwater form was interesting. I don't know how I feel exactly about that being the solution to everything, but I don't know, it was cool to look at, so, and the underwater stuff was fun. I did like this movie because like the characters are interesting, Mothra's great, the fairies are cool, but man, that plot is just so convoluted and complicated and confusing. So yeah, I liked it. Would I recommend it? That's hard to say. I do feel like you could totally skip it, just watch 1 and 3 in this series and skip 2, I don't think you're really missing a ton. It is interesting and does introduce Leo's ability to transform, but like, I don't know. Up to you. To take maybe. Like, it's fine, but it's not a must-watch by any means. And lastly is Rebirth of Mathra III. This one, things improved. The basic premise is Ghidorah is back, baby. Mothra's ancient enemy. This is pretty good. I liked the story with the little boy. He's all about getting courage and stuff. I loved how they had the evil fairy turn to good because she was like, oh, this is too much. And then one of the good fairies turned to evil. I wish that the good turn to evil one was more intentional rather than like being forced, but I still think it was a good, interesting idea, and how they overcame it was really interesting. Really everything with the fairies was really spot on in this one. I really love the design of Ghidorah. It's really intense and really interesting. He looks older, he looks like stuff's really grown out, and that's really cool. We do see a younger version of him, which I wasn't expecting, and at first I was like, no, but then thoroughly enjoyed, because basically they get desperate. They're like, the world's about to be destroyed. We have to do a Hail Mary and just go back to when Ghidorah was weaker, so back in the dinosaur times, and kill him then. That might wipe out humanity because Ghidorah is the reason the dinosaurs got destroyed, but like, that's a risk we're willing to take because if we don't, the entire Earth is just straight up destroyed. That's such an interesting concept. And like I said, at first I was kind of hesitant about it, but then they called attention to like its issues, and then I think they handled it in a really, really cool way. Like, the end is really neat, and I think makes a lot of sense and is fun. There really isn't much of a metaphor for this one, but it's still a very solid film. So yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed this film. It's not as good as the first one in the series or the very first 2 Mothra movies, but it's still a really interesting experience that I would totally recommend. So if you didn't want to do this whole trilogy, I would say definitely do 1 and 3. You could watch this one on its own because they're all kind of standalone, but 1 is for sure worth a watch. So yes, definitely good, would recommend. Alright, now for today's rankings, going in chronological order. First up is Rebirth of Mothra, sitting number 65 in the really like section. And then after that is Rebirth of Mathra II, sitting at number 117 in the liked section. And then bringing up the third of the trilogy is Rebirth of Mathra III, sitting at number 98 in the quite like section. And this is out of a total of 174 old movies so far this year.